Welcome to the Art of Growth and the Driven to Drawn panel series. Special welcome to the Type 6s this week. And we are already almost nearing the conclusion of this Driven to Drawn series. But I have a feeling this concept and the learnings of this season are going to stay with us for quite some time. If you are hearing this series and you know you could use a bit of a breakthrough because you aren't accelerating the way you want to, and you want to move more towards your drawn side, we can help with that. That is what we do. So maybe you've been considering coaching for a while, but you've never taken that step. You can go to theartofgrowth.org now and set up an appointment with Joel, Suzanne, or myself, Jim Zartman, and give yourself the gift of a single session just to see what it would feel like and why it's a game changer for so many people. You don't have to stay stuck. That's the good news. And only you can do it, but none of us can do any of it alone. And when I hit really hard points, like I did a couple weeks ago, there were calls I made to those voices in my life, those coaches and mentors who helped me get unstuck and push through. So reach out to us if you'd like to set that up. You can also take our Enneagram test or instincts test at theartofgrowth.org. And some of you have already been asking about certification, and the next round looks like it's going to be this summer. So you can check out all that at our website. But for now, let's jump in with our Type 6 panel on Driven to Drawn.
Okay, well, welcome to the Type 6 Driven to Drawn podcast. I am super excited to be here with all of you. Why don't you begin by introducing yourself? Tell us your first name and where you're from.
I'm Matt, and I am from Wichita, Kansas.
I am Timothy, and I am from Holland, Michigan.
I'm Mary Ann, and I'm from Cobourg in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Katie, and I'm from Lexington, South Carolina.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Driven to Drawn podcast. As you know, we're going to be talking about this idea of moving from driven to drawn space. And the reason why we're doing this is because there's been so much attention given in this sort of self-development world on the things that are wrong with us, the things that we need to fix, the things that we need to adjust. But this idea of drawn, or the thing that you are made to do, or another way of saying it is your best self. It's there. It just doesn't get as much airtime. We don't pay much attention to it. So for us, we were thinking if we were to actually focus our attention on that more, then maybe what it would do is help us to grow more towards that as opposed to trying to not be something. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And I'm curious as to what this looks like in the Type 6. What does drivenness look like? And what does drawnness look like? So let's begin with driven and talk to me about what that is like. What is the feeling internally for you? What are your thoughts? And what are you doing? So maybe begin there.
Well, when I'm driven, I feel like in my body, just very tense. My breath is just so limited and my body is very rigid. It's very clenched. It feels like I'm forced and I don't have enough time, or I'm thwarted, like I can't get to what I need to get to. And others are like, I feel like others are in charge of my life. I feel so victimized and I feel like I don't have choice. I don't have time. I'm forced. And so it, like, even just talking about it really just evokes such an emotional reaction for me. I end up doing the most. You know how, the kids these days say doing the most. Well, I'm doing the most to like get support and, just like, it's just so survival. It's just like, so like cavemanish. I feel like you're just out of your cave and you're like, don't come for me. It's crazy the way that feels. And it feels like just such a narrow path. And it feels like a very limited perspective of thought, especially. So that's what it feels like. And so how it plays out for me, I decided to try to come up with an example of how it plays out for me, like in a work setting, and how it plays out for me at home. If I can, say that kind of quickly. Like at work, I anticipate all the scenarios, kind of like a 6 would do anyway, but I anticipate all the scenarios and I end up stepping into roles that are not mine. I like assign those roles to myself. and end up doing tasks that aren't my job and just giving myself so much to do, like on top of what I've actually been assigned. And the thought behind it is like, it won't get done in time. It's just always like attached to time for me, not enough time. Or if all of this will impact me in some way. So it's almost like a preemptive strike to go ahead and just handle it in the front end. Because if it won't get handled, I could lose my job, which is ridiculous because I've had that job for almost 20 years, or they'll find someone else to do it. And at work, I may second guess myself. I mean, my mind is spinning so fast and there's so many things going on. I could have prepared at length and I'm still like second guessing myself. What if I left something out? I just don't have enough time to research the way I want to do it. And I need to go to the end of it, because I've got the 5 wings. So I want to go to the end of the research and make sure that I have everything, and just not enough time, and my mind's going faster than my body can go, making mistakes. So I end up getting really overwhelmed. And at home, a 6, the problem solver, I'm driven to find all the problems with all the people. So the way it plays out for me at home is finding problems on like the emotional landscape. Is everybody okay? Is everybody feeling okay? Are you good? And the answer is like not good enough for me. I need to look at their body language. And then I say, well, their body language doesn't match up with their words. So I need to ask them a lot more questions to make sure, like, are you really good? And so it ends up causing like more problems than the original thing. I mean, it could just been they had a bad day. It's the limited perspective, and it's also thinking that it's about me, like I must have done something wrong, just feeling guilty about something that's not even my fault probably. So just that questioning cycle. And sometimes, it is a problem. It's just something that is going on with them and it may not even have a solution or need to have a solution. So it's just that's how it plays out for me, the driven.
Wow, that's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, I could relate to the time pressure. That was something that came up when I was kind of brainstorming or thinking about it, and it surprised me. But and a lot of the other things that you said that maybe I wouldn't repeat, but like the not breathing and tension in the headache. And sometimes I feel like I'm a Gumby, or I did when my kids were little, like you guys are, or working full time and things. I was a Gumby being pulled in all directions, but I can do that to myself, even if I don't have commitments. But then other times we used to play murder ball in gym as a kid. It wasn't just dodgeball, it was murder ball. And I was the geeky girl with the glasses getting pummeled, and it feels like that, or like bumper cars or something. But related to the time is something about feeling bewildered and trying to catch up. Like everybody else has, I don't know, it just is that sense of trying to catch up. If I think of something in the family, I'll just think of a lighthearted thing. My kids are older now, and of course they're driving back and forth to university or to work, and they laugh. They call me Smother. It's like love Smother. Like it's going to be freezing rain overnight. So I'll try really, really hard. Okay, I'm not going to text them to tell them it's freezing rain and just put their windshields up and take their scraper into the house. I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it. And luckily, they know the Enneagram too. So they're very patient with that. But it can be just a small example. But obviously, there are a lot more that are way more intense. But driven to take care of people. I mean, I want to upgrade vehicles to safer vehicles and just a lot of that safety stuff. Oh, and also driven to check my parameters and constraints and things like that. Like, what's the weather going to be? What's going on today? And I used to drive somebody crazy. Like, what's the plan today? When I didn't really care what their plan was. I just wanted to know my degrees of freedom. Like, what are the constraints on me in terms of weather or money or whatever? I don't care what it is, but I want to know I'm free within what circle, kind of. But if there's too much freedom, then I'm driven to create the boundaries, is one thing that I would say, because then it's manageable choices.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting. It has that ambivalence to it where it's both like, yeah.
Oh, completely ambivalent. Yeah.
I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to, limit my options at the same time. Too many is, yeah. Oh,
100%.
You said manageable choices.
Yeah.
I like that
sure.
phrasing. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, and it's actually more fun too. So I lived up at a place with a big yard and had the resources to make it really beautiful, but it was rocky soil. So only a certain type of plant would grow there. So I had a blast researching everything that would only grow in rocky soil because I had to get trees that could handle no water. And I got my students to come over with pickaxes and ordered a refrigerated truck full of trees, and they all thrived. So that was manageable. They had to live with those conditions. Whereas if it was just plant a yard, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Wow.
That's not really driven, I guess, but.
No, but I love that, because I was thinking the same thing. I think that's more of that could actually point more towards the drawn space of, being okay with like, this is what I have to work with, as opposed to like, to where your mind might go, which is, oh, I wish we should have this. We should have had that. If we had this, then we could do this. This is your parameters. So
without the parameters, it's drivenness and it's overwhelm and it's paralysis. And yeah.
Interesting. No.
Yeah, I can really resonate with a lot of what Katie and Marianne said. Just this driven is almost like a centrifugal wheel inside of me that just keeps gaining speed as things pop up, and it's gaining speed. And if I'm not aware of that momentum, that inertia is going to get me into a driven mode. Typically at work, that's going to look like I'm going to be less chatty. I'm going to be less personable. We're not very confrontational to begin with, but I'm going to be a lot more direct. And then I thought something that Katie said that was interesting is, as that is happening, I delegate less. I'm a manager, and so I have a team of about 8 or 9. And somehow when things come in and I'm in a driven mode, I then start to think, well, I can do this more like I want, the control thing. I want to control exactly the messaging that comes out. And then it becomes overwhelming. It just kind of is a cycle that feeds itself. And if you don't have the awareness to stop and just say, what is going on, or slow down, or take a couple deep breaths. Oftentimes I walk fast. I mean, when I'm going from one meeting to the next, there's a lot of focused energy and moving fast. And sometimes that's needed, but a lot of times it's like, just slow down. Where are you going? And so that's kind of how I experience it at work. I think at home, it comes out as more impatient. My son, bless his heart, is not fast at anything. And I'm talking about just, you pull into a parking spot at a grocery store. All right, let's get out. And it's like, I'm sure it's probably 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It feels like 8 minutes for him to just get out of his seat. And he's 6. So it's not a skill level thing. It's just, he just takes life a little more mellow. And the impatience pop up. It seems like at home more for me.
Yeah.
I can resonate with the physical aspects. When I feel driven, I will immediately get a tension headache. And that could last even the rest of the day, even if I've calmed down. But that's when I know I haven't been taking care of whatever this issue is. And so I think when I feel like my safety is gone, so safety with relationship to boundaries, like what Marianne was saying, or safety with relationship to other people, I want to know what the rules are and how to function within the group, and how we're going to relate to each other. And I always want people to know I care about you. If I feel like all of that has been turned around, then immediately I'm trying to solve. How do I figure out how to solve this? How are we better? How can we get better? But the problem is my wheels are spinning so fast that I'm not going to be able to solve it. But generally, if I'm just driven, I then start to drive over people, kind of like what Matt was saying too, in some senses. Like, for example, my family, every year we go on a vacation with a lot of our other family members. And we're there for 2 weeks, and then we try to decide what we're going to do on each day. Well, sometimes when we're all together, family will say, yeah, what are we going to do tomorrow? Yeah, what are we going to do tomorrow? Yeah, what are we going to do tomorrow? And I'm thinking, yes, what are we going to do tomorrow? But there has to be a conclusion. Who's going to come up with the answer? And I'm trying to give it to everybody else because I don't want to take control. Everybody else will probably have great ideas. And then nobody comes up with an idea. And what I end up doing is I snap and then I just say, this is what we're doing. Right. And then my wife might say, hey, that kind of didn't come off right. And, et cetera, et cetera. And I realize I plowed over everyone and I didn't involve myself in the conversation earlier. I think I was trying to just pursue my own protection, my own safety. And instead I actually just plowed over and I could have engaged, related, trusted that there was safety in the midst. So, yeah.
And for me, that would be more related to doubt or insecurity in what I want to do. Or what if they don't, a lot of internal narrative going on there. What if they don't want? What if they say they don't mind doing X, Y, and Z, but really in the back of their mind, they do. And then by this time, 5 minutes have passed. And it, for me, it's more for an insecurity thing, especially at work, maybe not as much with the family, but a lot of times, I doubt my questions or I doubt my suggestions. And not that I have great suggestions all the time, but the reality is they're horrible if you don't express them. If you bring them up, even if they're, not valid or we go a different route, they're still worth hearing. And it's hard to give myself that much grace, I guess you would call it, to be able to express them.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, just to add a couple other things, I can become extremely judgmental when I'm driven. And then in panic, I can try to garner other people around me for support. So who do I talk to make sure that we're all in agreement? So I still have some safety in the group. I'm a phobic 6. So just, if that helps.
Yeah. Who else is there any of you counterphobic?
I'm phobic, counterphobic.
Phobic, counterphobic, a bit
I'm
of both.
self-pres sexual, so it really is.
Gotcha.
Depends on the situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm very direct in my speech usually, and that's like everyone that knows me knows that. And I want to add the extreme endpoint for me for drivenness is usually, like overwhelm. And I've worked myself into a tizzy and then I just start procrastinating. And that's where I hit that 9 sloth. And then I'm like, I'm out. I don't even know what to do. Too many options. Don't know. Information overload, overwhelm. And I also want to say that when I'm not procrastinating, when I'm in that drivenness space, on the outside, it looks like productivity, especially if even if I'm at home. I'm getting a lot of stuff done. Looks like I'm expending a lot of energy, could sometimes be mistaken for enthusiasm, but my productive thinking is literally on the chopping block. And I know it's not my best intellectual effort.
That's good awareness. Yeah, really good. This has been deeply insightful. I can feel it. I can hear it, which is really helpful for me to understand how much that sort of self-doubt or fear or vigilance, however you might word it, comes through. And when it does, then the overthink kicks in and it makes everything else much more difficult. Let's talk about what it looks like when you are drawn. What does that look like? Same thing. What are you feeling internally? What's happening in your mind, and what are you doing?
Obviously, if I'm in a more relaxed state and able to engage conversations, events with more of a curiosity and an openness versus a judgmentalism, that is something I think 6s struggle with in general. But I know in the environment I grew up in, from a religious side, it was very, very judgmental. And so that's just been hardwired hard into my psyche. And so trying to break that, that's a hard habit to break. So drawn is just this, for me, is this open curiosity and the security to know that if I don't agree with what maybe your answer is or what your view is, that it's really okay. That I don't have to agree with you and you don't have to agree with me, which is hard for a dependent stance 6, right? I mean, it's not an easy thing to figure out. And if I'm lucky, maybe 5% of my day I can spend in that space. Another example, the closest other thing, like tangibly, what does that feel like? last December, my dad he's 82, was in the hospital. And I just felt this overwhelming nudge to board it. He's in California. I'm in Wichita, to board a plane to go out to see him. My sister lives near them and my brother's in Nashville. So he was far away. And I was driving to the airport and I'm like, okay, when I get there, what can I do to make my mom and sister know that I'm there? I'm supporting them. Do I need to haul wood in for my mind is just cranking up faster and faster. And with that, my anxiety energy is just rising. And I believe God kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, just be present. That's all you need to do, is just show up and be present. And it was like, yeah, I think I can do that. And I just kind of felt the de-escalation of that internal tension. I got there. I did plenty of things for my mom and my sister, so that wasn't a problem. But I wasn't forcing what I think they need. They were able to, by being present, they were able to express to me what they needed, and I could meet that need. And that was kind of the most recent, like, just overwhelming. There was a peace behind that, just a calmness.
Love that. I love that. There's so much about that I love, but you think about the anticipation of the 6, and that wasn't as active in you, and that it was a more of a willingness to be receptive in that moment. If there's a need, I can respond to it, as opposed to what might the need be. That anticipation that sometimes drives the 6. Really good. That's beautiful.
I think, Matt, you mentioned the calm and the peace, and I would say that that's some of the feelings for the drawn part, and a spaciousness. Physically, I would feel lithe. That's the word that came to me. Like, just like, it's still strong, but it's not clenched. And in terms of the behavior part of it, I think what came to me was changing from defensive to disarming. So if I give an example from early in my teaching career, in the very first year, a little boy in grade 9 was like, you're so effing stupid. And I got out in the hall and I said, do you really think I'm stupid? And I didn't mention him swearing at all. He goes, no. And that happened one other time too, with a representative from the people who built my home, who had to come over because the basement had flooded, and he'd been refusing to answer my calls. And, I was learning some of this stuff. And he finally came over and I said, I'm sorry for having been so rude. I just don't have anything between pushover and F you. And the man said, me too. And we laughed.
Great.
And he'd been not returning the calls because he was afraid of conflict. So it was, I know that my kids have told me in the past that I'm so defensive, and I think it's a lot lighter now.
I'm going to remember that one. That's a good one.
I know. That is a good one.
I don't have anything between pushover and FU. That is
that should be,
I don't know if that could...
Jim, we got to get that on our mugs.
T-shirt.
We sell the mugs. Yeah, it's on the mug or the T-shirt. Absolutely.
And I think in terms of a question, one way that you put this, Joel, was, now I'm going to put some light out into the world. I was listening to you say that, like, what would that be, kind of thing. And it's almost like, I think that our gift doesn't work if we're aware of it, but maybe it does. Our gift just happens naturally. So it's the things that you guys have talked about, it being ease and some things like that. And if I look at behaviors that would be like that, it would be being an advocate, jumping on board with promoting things where a 6 can say, yes, that makes sense. That's it. And then advocate or support the person who's doing that stuff. I sent a quote to you, Joel, that I'd forgotten about, from a movie, Almost Famous, which I haven't seen, but the quote is that the only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool. And I think that can be a 6 superpower too, with just setting everybody at ease through dorkiness or something like that. And that's not being bored. And the last thing that I would say about our light or our gifts are things that are often not valued. I call it being Aunt Mabel. So my father had some difficulties in his family and was asked to leave home when he was about 16. And later on, he was very successful in his career, worked with NASA, worked nuclear power plants, various things. And the story goes that a doctor in the town loaned him money so that he could go to grade 13, which we have in Ontario, because to go to teacher's college to make money to go to grade 13 so he could go to university. It's a long story, but the credit's given to this doctor. But what they forget is that my dad's Aunt Mabel went and asked the doctor. And that's what we would do. Go and ask the doctor, hey, would you lend this kid some money? And I think that's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, that is.
So I think a lot of what I feel drawn is small things, and it's hard to be secure that that's enough.
Yeah.
But I really feel like it is.
Yeah, I've heard that from other sixes. And thank you for saying that. And I saw all your heads nodding there. It's like the small things that make a big difference, that matter, are wonderful. There's so much there that I want you all to interact with and, share, of course, how it shows up for you, the drawn space. But I did want to highlight something that I think can be easily overlooked as part of the growth process to moving into the drawn space that you mentioned, which was just simply asking the question. You could have been defensive with that ninth grade boy and argumentative, but you put yourself in that position. It's a very six kind of thing to do, but it's a very six thing to do when there's a little bit more awareness and less defensiveness, to just simply say, is that the way you perceive me? Beautiful question. And one that is disarming and starts to move. I like how you distinguish that, the difference. What did you say? The difference between disarming and what was it?
Defensive to disarming.
Yeah. It's excellent. Yeah. So that's one of the things I would say, those are the sort of hacks. That's what the question I was going to ask is, how do you move from one to the next? So put a little marker there, because that's one of those things that I think is what you did to help you move more towards the higher side of the six.
Yeah, it's so interesting because my wife is a 9, and that's extremely helpful for me as a 6, because moving to 9, but when we were earlier on in our dating and even engagement, I was very judgmental. No, this is the scenario. This is what it is. And she would say, I don't think that's what they mean. Or I think you're just arguing over semantics. And I hated whenever she would say that, because I'm like, no, this is what it is. And I mean, her patience and her graciousness with me has been just so tremendous that has caused me to see the beauty of the curiosity and the asking of questions instead. To listen first and to try to seek to understand, and not just assume that something is awful. I think when we talk about the negative side per se of the 6 is that we can perceive all the problems. Well, that takes a lot of creativity to perceive all the problems. Well, let's just turn that creativity around in a more positive light that actually would be refreshing and for me and also for those around me. So I have found curiosity to be huge. I know, like, when I am drawn, I'm curious and extremely creative. All of a sudden my mind is working on these beautiful ideas. And I think if I get to more of a root in my own self, the wounding message of a 6 is essentially, you can't trust yourself. But there are moments when I get into this arena where I realize I can only be me. I can't be who you want me to be. And me is how God created me. So that's fine. That's good. And so I'm going to enter in as me. There's weird moments, but me, it's weird moments, but just entering in and then being able to have that creativity and curiosity. And it's so beautiful. And when you experience that, or when I experience that, I start wanting more of that. And it motivates me away from the drivenness. And and starts to motivate me to move in the direction of the drawn more and more. So I would add that from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
I can definitely piggyback off that. I mean, just the creativity, the amount of creativity since I've been doing like my work, the work, and has just blossomed that I didn't even know existed for me. A creative space is definitely part of my drawn journey. And so when I feel drawn, I realize like I'm actually in charge of my own life. Like, you know, I am making active choices. Everything that's happened to me in life that I've been involved in, like that's been kind of a choice. You know, I've had choice in this. Like I'm not a victim. You know, it may not have been a great choice, but it was a choice. And I can own that. And the drawn space for me is like the body's like loosening up. You know, I'm like more proactive and the perspectives open up. Like Timothy was saying, I don't just consider the negative. I have a wider array of perspectives available to me. Yeah, I've got choice, and there's kind of like a natural flow of things. Like I can sort of like move through my day and everything's just like falls into the slots is how it feels. And then like I can use my skills like more wisely and like prioritize them. Even the things that I'm really good at work, I can advocate for me doing those things and like speaking up and say, I think this would, you know, you all would be better served if I do this than this. And it really is, you know, it's scary to do that. But once you start doing it, you know, it's like anything, it's a skill that you practice and you become better at it. And then like Timothy said, you feel it and you want more of it because it feels so good. And it feels honestly just like a wider path. And like you have like all the time that you need, not like all the time in the world, but like the time that you need. And even just that thought is like really freeing for me. Just like you have the time that you need, take it and it will work out. And like I'm less affected by my circumstances. Like I'm still having the same circumstances or similar in my life, but I've learned to support myself. You know, I've learned that the support that I'm trying to get from other people, I can just ask myself what I need and give myself that. And I have a child that I'm very strongly thinking that they're also a 6. They're watching me and they're watching how I handle things. And I can discuss this stuff with them in depth and it's clicking for them. It's clicking like this is a different way. Like, you know, we're made this way. We're always going to have some doubts and worries, you know, but we don't have to act on them. We can take that pause, take that breath and choose. You know, we're not like a victim by like, you know, our head space or whatever. And then another way that I feel drawn is like at home, you know, just kind of to parallel the driven experience. Like whenever I was trying to help solve everyone's issues, like I can just let people have their own experience. Just let them know, you know, are you okay? And then just take them at their word. Don't try to read into anything. Step back, calm down, and leave the floor open for, you know, support if they need it. They know they can come to me. They do. But if me like forcing that, it's all about control for a 6. And if you can let go of your grasp and realize that we are not in control. And if you have a faith system, that's been pivotal for me. I can do my best and let go of those outcomes, you know, and just let other people come to you if they need to come to you. Like, don't force them, because you're basically preventing them from having their own experience and their own journey by forcing your hand on it.
Yeah, all I'm like saying is amen to what Katie's saying. So many of the things that she says, I just resonate with entirely. Yeah. And I just to comment on the one thing, to recognize other people are in process, and that's good. And that's okay. Yeah. And that's wonderful. And to let them be in it instead of trying to quickly fix so that everything goes back. Like, no, it's okay. And it's good and beautiful.
Yeah. This is so, you know, I love everything you're saying. It's like I can see the 9, the high end of the 9 in you, right? Because you get those points. You get the 6, 3, 9 there. and it's that trusting of the path as it unfolds, trusting things as they are, the not demanding more options, being okay with what is, and finding that it's enough. It's a movement. It feels like a movement from scarcity mindset to more of an abundance mindset. I've got what I need right here. I'm hearing all of that in that, and it's magnificent.
It's so fluid, though. I just want to point that out. Like, it's going to go back. You're going to have it all. But the more that you're in it, just like Timothy said, you're going to be, that's the whole point of being drawn. Like, once you have it, you don't want to not have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a skill that you can like learn to keep doing. It's, develop patterns, see your old patterns, see when you're in it, and then get yourself out of it.
Okay, well, let's go there then. Let's talk about that. How do you do that? How do you move from, so you've tasted, I love that. You've seen the high side. This is who I am at my best. This is the person I like. I like being in this skin. Other people seem to like me as well when I'm in this space. How do I get there? How do I pivot? Because you're absolutely right. None of us are ever going to be always in that drawn space ever. We're going to go back and forth. Like we say all the time, your starting point doesn't need to be your end point. If you start at the driven, you can pivot to the drawn. You start at the drawn and then you end up in the driven. How do you get back to the drawn? So those are the questions we're starting to explore a lot more. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you, what are some tactics, some habits that you've engaged in?
One of the things that I've used is an acronym called SNAP. So when you notice the tension building in your head or kind of in your chest, to stop. This is what the first one is. Just stop and then notice what is going on. What do I feel? And then start asking yourself questions of, is what I'm thinking, whatever's driving that thing, is that even true? And if it's true, ask yourself again, because it's probably your personality talking, and there's probably a little bit of inaccuracy to that. And then to what the word you use is pivot. What do I need to do? What is the truth? Well, the truth is I can't control this, but the reality is, control is my favorite illusion. So as you work through that, that's where the awareness comes in. It's just stop and noticing, and you're halfway there. You'll do it well sometimes, and you won't do it well other times. It's a journey, right? It's not an end point. And so that's one of the things I use throughout the day. I find if I don't, as far as other practices, get up before everybody else is up, I usually make a cup of coffee. I usually do a little bit of reading. And if I'm disciplined, I'll usually spend some time in a centering prayer or meditation type thing, just sitting quietly. And it helps my day so much. You'd think it'd be very easy to do it from a discipline standpoint. And yet I struggle with it every day. Well, I don't want to sit there alone, because now I'm stuck with what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. But those are some of the things that I do. I also have an app on my phone that randomly displays messages that you put in there. You can put whatever you want in there. And so I have reminders that just pop up randomly throughout the day, different quotes that have been inspirational, that kind of thing. And it's enough to interrupt the circuit throughout the day that it kind of gives you a chance for a pause.
Yeah. You'd also mentioned earlier, like breathing. That was an additional thing you said, like to go back
Absolutely.
to the breath as a way to kind of slow down, which is huge for every type. Taking just a few breaths, 3 or 4 of them, and then, okay, now let's get back at this. So you had mentioned that. I want to make sure we got that.
Yeah, no, that is a good one.
And I've heard from other sixes where they'll talk about when their stress comes up, they'll notice their breathing getting more shallow. So when they're sitting on the computer or something and the stress coming up, I'm getting a few nods here. They'll notice, oh, my breath is really shallow. I need to deepen that, because as I've gotten more anxious, my breath has gotten more shallow. And if I deepen it again, I actually increase my capacity to handle what's in front of me.
For some, it needs to be more, some types need actually more chest breathing, because they can be lower, like in the energy. Whereas a 6, it's almost all chest breathing. And so for them, the hyperactivity, the anxiety, the need to move happens here. And so to kind of lower the breath to the belly, and see if you can expand that. I've had a lot of sixes say, I can't even expand my stomach. It's like everything is up here, tight. And that's, when we're wound up, we're going to be that way. So, but yeah, belly breathing seems to be a key for a number of sixes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing real quick, while I was thinking of it, is when I get really into my personality, we'll just say stressed, whatever you want to call it, sometimes I can't shut my mind down. But I find if I put my body in motion, whether it's a walk, whether it's doing something outside with the kids, something completely different that removes me from being able to sit there and think about it and engages my mind enough to distract it, while what's spooling my mind up is starting to wind down. That helps a lot. Exercise is fantastic too. That's another one.
Yeah.
Basically what you've already mentioned about like how you're noticing it in your body. I think that sixes, especially just like head types, can really you might notice that there's a discomfort in your body, but you might quickly disregard it and move faster. And one thing that I've learned is not to ignore that. That's good information for you. And figure out what thought is causing that emotion. Like figure out what your emotion is and what thought, so it's like the whole thought work that's really helped me. And I worked with a life coach to do this. And basically, once you figure out the thought that's causing you the most emotional discomfort, let that emotion pass, because all of this breathing and all this stuff and just this anxiousness, this nervous energy is suppression of emotion, not allowing it to freely pass. And once you learn how to do it, I had to learn how to do it in front of other people, which was agonizing. I thought I would die. Just having other people look at me. I started crying. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Vulnerability, hangover,
right.
Whatever. But literally, put your hand on your chest and give yourself like that compassion and like let that emotion move through your body. And once you do that, then you can take your thoughts into something that feels believable to you, because sixes are not consumers of BS. So you can't do the toxic positivity thing. It's just, you can't do a reframe. It's just not going to stick. So you got to, have a thought that's actually believable, or I'm becoming a person that can handle life or handle whatever situation, whatever your thoughts are. It can be a bridge thought, like I'm becoming, instead of like, I am a person who can handle this, I'm becoming one. Mm-hmm. And that feels like a little bit more like of a, baby step to try to handle it. And then, the emotions that follow that different thought are quite different. And I will say for sixes to take all those questions that you question other people on and turn them on yourself. Ask yourself some good questions, and you might just get some good answers that might be like good information as to what's really going on with you, what's really bothering you.
Yeah, we had one six say that when she noticed that a lot of her logic, thinking about, what seemed to be logical, what seemed to make sense, and all that drivenness up in the headspace was being driven by fear. And so for her, having to go back to saying, oh no, this isn't just, I need to think through, I need to have the right ideas, the right plans. It's to go back to, wait, what's happening? So like you're describing, back to the emotion. Oh, that's what's going on, right? There's an anxiety, there's a fear. And like you're mentioning, even deeper, what are the deeper underlying emotions behind the fear? That, for each center, it seems like we convert a lot of emotions into the one that center seems to fixate on. And so for head types, it's like converting a lot of other emotions to fear and to anxiety. So really good. I really appreciate you sharing that. Marianne, what about you? The conversion.
Between driven and drawn, I feel like I believe that there has to be some kind of practice or discipline, and which people have shared lots of those. Just awareness does so much. I think that I need to have lots of pauses. If I'm doing something I love, even if it's creative or research, I can get in the driven place. So those practices can notice when to pause and breathe, which people have said. And I think on this, I'm probably learning from a lot of other people, the people in this group, about what they do. but I do value just leaving a space for in between too. I'm in an in between space right now. I've been retired. I don't know what's next. And I know that drawn isn't just career wise, but I'm just in an in between place. And I think that if I look at my kids in their stages of development, before they learned to roll over or before they walked, they were miserable. They knew there was something else, but they had no idea what it was. And so just to be okay with that. But I really also need to really take care of my food and my sleep and all of those kinds of things. If I haven't had those, I'm not going to be drawn. It's going to be driven to get back to sleep and to get some food.
Well, there's some practicality. That's
Good.
You are part of that, what's called the practical triad. So there's the practicality of, it for all of us. And Jim and I have spent quite a bit of time recently talking about a lot of the stuff that has to do with, you can do a lot of inner work, but if you're not sleeping right, you're not eating right, it's not going to help you.
Such a good point, Marianne.
Yeah.
There's an expression that I would use with my grade 9s when they were supposed to be figuring out their niche, just like animals have niches. And it has to do with food habits and sleeping habits and stuff with animals too. So the expression HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, how much, make sure you learn when you get lonely and reach out before then, learn when you get tired and do something about it. How do you handle anger? Those kinds of things that otherwise I'm a freaking bear. I'm horrible.
Yeah, I wanted to add something else. Just I resonate with so much of what was said with processing, pausing. For me, it's helpful to write out things, to go slower because my brain's going so fast, and to write forces me to slow down. Yeah. So that's something that I do, or maybe I go on a walk with my wife and we can just talk, and it's going to be for a little while. Or maybe I just say she talks and I just listen, but it helps my mind to slow down. I would also say, with a 6's tendency to see what could be negative, I actually think that there can be a positive in that. When things are going, or when we're feeling tense and we feel like things are breaking apart, I think 6's might have a beautiful ability to lament, truly, and to not just ignore the problem. Like Katie says, we don't like BS. So not everything's perfect. There's beauty in the brokenness. And we can actually take time to feel the sorrow of it and truly embrace that, and then move on in the hope that Katie was talking about as well, and others of you. There's beauty in moving forward, even in the tension, like what Mary was saying too, or in this in between time. But lamenting, for me, that's been huge for me, of being able to communicate. Not whine, not complain, but to say, this really is an issue. This really is a problem. But I think things are going to be okay in moving forward. And it's also helped me, I think, to be very much more empathetic to other people too. So instead of just, again, solving the problem so quickly, I've been realizing lament is a beautiful thing. So if I can process and journal and think through, breathe, pause, then I see the beauty in other people, that they can do that too. And that's going to be a beautiful process for them.
That is so beautiful, Timothy. I mean, that is for sure, I feel like the journey and the natural ebb and the flow of life in itself. There can be joy and there can be pain, sometimes in the same space.
Yes. Coexist.
Yeah. Your what you're describing there makes me think of how the fear or the anxiety or the thing that you perceive of being a problem, negative, something difficult, when you're in that space, you're keeping it from just automatically going right to the head center and going right to logic and solving and going in that direction. And I love that. I think that that's such good wisdom for all types. I think everybody can
So
benefit from
good.
that. But it's slowing that down. So I think it's beautifully said in a way to just kind of pause here and wrap this up. I just feel like it's like such a beautiful moment. I just want to sort of sit in it for a moment and absorb that. And I wonder how many others are feeling the same. But yeah, that's so good.
It's very good.
Well, to each of you, I can't thank you enough. This was so good, so rich. And you opened your souls up and you gave us a gift. And yes, there's so much more. And afterwards, we'll be thinking about things like, oh, maybe I should have said this, or maybe I could have added that. Remember, this is process, and that's what we're in. We're exploring this, we're discovering. Of course, you're going to have more later, and that's wonderful. And keep sharing, because we're all in this process of growth in learning. What does it look like to be drawn? And the more that we talk about this, the more this gets disseminated out, and the more others hear about it, and the more they do their work, and together, we're going to be better. And so thank you to each of you.
So thank you so much for listening. Our sixes out there, we appreciate you. We thank you for the safety that you bring to the community around you, the support you give. And I love that we were able to make you more heard today so that you can feel supported. It's a huge, huge help to us whenever you write us a review on iTunes. Helps people find the show. It's all that algorithmic magic that helps us so much. Because this is a free podcast, y'all. These resources are free. So leave us a review on iTunes and follow us out on Instagram at Just Art of Growth. But for now, my friends, may you honor your drawnness to the we, to the supportive community that you can form around you, that you serve, that you give yourself as a gift to. May you be aware of the light that is yours uniquely. May you tune into your body and let it anchor you when the energy feels like it's pulling you up and out the top of your head. May you whisper the strength of the word now to yourself when pulled off into future possibilities. May you be here and recognize the gift you have to bring and let it draw you towards what is possible for you. Grace and growth, my friends.